Alyssa Bustamante, Missouri, 2009. There are stories that disturb even seasoned investigators, cases that linger long after the prison doors close, because they challenge our assumptions about what a teenager is capable of. The case of Alyssa Bustamante is one of those stories. It began in a quiet Missouri town, the kind of place where neighbors knew one another for years, where children played in cul-de-sacs under a sky that always seemed calm. On October 21st, 2009, that calm was shattered by the sudden disappearance of a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth Alton. What investigators would uncover over the next few days would become one of the most chilling examinations of adolescent violence in modern American history. Elizabeth was described by her family as cheerful, affectionate, and timid, a child who disliked sleeping without a nightlight. She vanished while walking home from a friend's house, barely a few hundred yards from her own door. It should have been a simple walk. It should have been safe. When she didn't return home, panic set in immediately. This wasn't a girl who wandered. The sheriff's department quickly mobilized a search. Officers, neighbors, and volunteers combed wooded areas, drainage ditches, and fields. What no one outside the Bustamante household knew was that the key to the mystery was hidden within a teenager who watched the search unfold with a silence that would later haunt investigators. Alyssa Bustamante was 15 years old, a high school student with bleached hair, a history of depression, and a social media presence filled with dark themes, references to self-harm, and a fascination with death. But this alone didn't set off alarms. Many teens express angst online. What made Alyssa different was something no one could have predicted. Months earlier, she had dug 2 shallow graves in a wooded area behind her house for reasons she never fully explained. She later admitted that she wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. Those words would become central to one of the toughest sentencing hearings in Missouri's juvenile criminal history. As the search intensified, police interviewed neighbors, including Alyssa. Officers noticed she seemed nervous. Her story changed slightly each time they spoke to her. Then one investigator noticed fresh scratches on her arms, marks that didn't appear self-inflicted. This was enough to request a more thorough interview. Eventually, Alyssa's own grandmother urged her to tell the truth. The dam finally broke. Alyssa's voice was reportedly quiet and expressionless when she confessed. She had strangled, stabbed, and slashed Elizabeth before dragging the small body into one of the pre-dug graves. When officers followed Alyssa into the woods to recover the body, veteran law enforcement officials later said the scene was one they would never forget. The brutality of the crime, combined with the youth of both the victim and the perpetrator, created a moment of disbelief so profound that even seasoned investigators struggled to process it. But the most disturbing detail was still to come. During a search of Alyssa's bedroom, detectives found her diary. In it, one entry stood out, written in blue ink with chilling clarity. The entry described killing Elizabeth. It ended with, it was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my God, I can't do this, it's pretty enjoyable. This diary entry would later dominate national headlines, becoming a symbol of the apparent heartlessness of the act and undermining every attempt by the defense to argue that the killing was an impulsive act of a mentally troubled teenager. Prosecutors argued that the pre-dug graves and the diary entry proved premeditation beyond doubt. The public, upon learning these details, reacted with overwhelming outrage. News outlets across the country debated the central question: how does a 15-year-old develop the mindset to carry out a killing with such calculated indifference? Psychologists who evaluated Alyssa described her childhood as fractured. She had attempted suicide multiple times, struggled with severe depression, and had been on medication for years. Her father was in prison. Her mother was largely absent. Friends later said Alyssa often joked about violence, but it was brushed off as edgy teenage humor. Nothing about her outward behavior signaled a crime of this magnitude. Yet the evaluations also uncovered something deeply unsettling. Alyssa's emotional responses appeared blunted. She understood right from wrong intellectually, but her empathy appeared fractured, inconsistent, or underdeveloped. During her sentencing hearing in 2012, now 18 years old, Alyssa stood in a courtroom filled with Elizabeth's grieving family and apologized through tears. "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would," she said. But to Elizabeth's family, the words felt hollow. Her aunt said, "You're a monster. Every time I see your face, I see evil." Others described the apology as a performance, a last attempt to appear remorseful before the judge ruled on her fate. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Alyssa Bustamante to life in prison with the possibility of parole. The possibility of parole became a major point of debate. Supporters of harsher punishment argued that someone capable of such a crime should never be released. Supporters of juvenile rehabilitation argued that the brain of a 15-year-old is still developing, and a teen, even a violent one, could change dramatically by adulthood. Even today, the case remains one of the most disturbing involving a teenage girl in American history, not only for the brutality of the act, but for the cold curiosity that seemed to motivate it. It forces an uncomfortable question. Was this a tragedy born from mental illness, trauma, and untreated instability? Or was it something far darker, something that defied the usual patterns seen in juvenile offenders? The truth may never be fully known. What remains is the story of a child whose life was stolen, another child whose life was irrevocably twisted, and a community left trying to understand how innocence can collapse into violence with so little warning. Jasmine Richardson, Alberta, 2006, approximately 900 words. Some crimes seem impossible to reconcile with the age of the offender. They challenge not just our understanding of violence, but our understanding of adolescence itself. The case of Jasmine Richardson from Medicine Hat, Alberta, is one of those cases. In 2006, she was only 12 years old when she became the youngest person in Canadian history ever convicted of multiple murders. The brutality of the crime, the chilling psychology behind it, and the disturbing influence of an older boyfriend created a story that still leaves investigators uneasy nearly 2 decades later. The Richardson family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. By all outward signs, they were ordinary. A stable household, loving parents, a younger son who adored his sister. Routines that mirrored the rhythm of every middle-class Canadian family. But beneath that surface, Jasmine was undergoing a transformation that neither her parents nor her teachers fully understood. She had begun exploring online communities centered around goth and vampire subcultures. At 11 and 12, many kids experiment with identity. But Jasmine's shift happened fast, too fast, according to those who knew her. She traded colorful clothes for black fishnets, heavy eyeliner, and dark themes. It wasn't the style that worried people. It was the speed and intensity with which she embraced a radically different persona. Around this time, Jasmine met someone who would change the trajectory of her life in the most destructive way imaginable. A 23-year-old man named Jeremy Steinke. Steinke claimed to be a 300-year-old werewolf and openly embraced violent fantasies. Jasmine, barely out of childhood, was immediately drawn into his orbit. Their relationship was secretive, intense, and unhealthy from its very beginning. But what frightened later investigators was not Steinke's delusions. It was Jasmine's willingness to believe them. Jasmine's parents discovered the relationship and forbade her from seeing Jeremy. They were alarmed that their daughter was communicating with an adult man more than a decade older than her. They took away her computer access, restricted her phone, and imposed rules in hopes of breaking the connection. What they didn't realize was that Jasmine was already emotionally entangled. To her, this wasn't a punishment, it was war. She felt misunderstood, controlled, oppressed. And Jeremy fed these emotions, encouraging her resentment not just privately, but publicly online. On a profile page themed around violence, he wrote, "My lover's family forbids our love. They shall regret it." Weeks before the murders, Jasmine wrote variations of the same fantasy, destroying everything that stood between her and Jeremy. Investigators would later find a message exchange between them that hinted at something far darker than teenage rebellion. It was a conversation about killing her family. On the night of April 22, 2006, the Richardson home went quiet, like any other evening. But in the early hours of the following morning, Jeremy and Jasmine put their plan into motion. What happened inside that house is still discussed with horror by Canadian criminal experts. Jeremy entered the home carrying knives. Jasmine, armed as well, followed behind him. Her parents were stabbed repeatedly. Her father fought back so violently that blood sprayed across the walls and ceiling. But against a knife and an older, larger attacker, he never stood a chance. Her mother died upstairs, her father downstairs. What shocked investigators most was what happened next. Jasmine went into the room of her 8-year-old brother, Jacob. He was frightened, confused, pleading. Jasmine killed him herself. She later told a therapist that she feared leaving him alive would make him suffer without his parents. For some, this explanation provided a twisted sense of rationale. For others, it revealed an even more chilling truth, that she understood the implications of what she was doing and chose to continue. When the bodies were discovered the next day, Medicine Hat police arrived at a crime scene that was almost surreal. The parents lay in pools of blood. The little boy's room was a heartbreaking display of innocence, interrupted by unimaginable violence. But the most confusing detail was the absence of the girl who lived there. Jasmine was missing. At first, officers feared she had been kidnapped. But as they searched her room, reading printouts of online conversations, journals, and drawings, a different theory emerged, one that detectives initially didn't want to believe. Jasmine wasn't a victim. She was involved. Within 24 hours, Jasmine and Jeremy were found in a neighboring town, laughing, kissing, and talking about running away to start a new life. Jeremy was reportedly bragging to friends that he had killed her family because he loved her. Jasmine, when interviewed, expressed regret, but her tone was strange. Not emotionless, but almost detached, as though she understood what society expected her to feel, but hadn't fully processed it. The legal consequences were complicated by her age. In Canada, juveniles are protected under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, meaning no one under 14 can be tried as an adult, even for triple homicide. The public was furious, but the law was clear. Jasmine would receive a youth sentence with a maximum of 10 years. Jeremy, however, was tried as an adult and received life in prison with no parole eligibility for 25 years. Psychologists spent months evaluating Jasmine. They found no signs of psychosis, no major mental disorder, but deep emotional immaturity and susceptibility to manipulation. Yet, some evaluators noted that she also demonstrated a surprising level of planning and cognitive clarity. She knew right from wrong. She simply chose Jeremy over her family. Over the years, Jasmine underwent extensive therapy, education, and rehabilitation. When she turned 18, she moved to a halfway house. When she turned 22, she completed her sentence, fully released with no restrictions, no interviews, no public statements, no documented contact with Jeremy. Only a new name and a private life outside public view. To this day, the case raises difficult questions. Was Jasmine Richardson a manipulated child? Or was she a willing participant in one of the most disturbing crimes in Canadian history? The answer depends on which expert you ask, but the facts remain the same. 3 people died, a community was traumatized, and a 12-year-old girl crossed a line that few believe can ever be fully understood. Sarah Marie Johnson, Idaho, 2003. On September 2nd, 2003, in the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, the lives of Alan and Diane Johnson were tragically cut short by the shocking actions of their 16-year-old daughter, Sarah Marie Johnson. The crime, a rare and chilling instance of parricide, captivated the nation and raised questions about adolescent psychology, morality, and the capacity for violence in youth. Sarah grew up in a seemingly stable household. Her father, Alan, co-owned a landscaping business, while her mother, Diane, worked in a local clinic. Friends and neighbors described the Johnsons as a caring family, devoted to their children and involved in their community. Sarah attended high school and appeared on the surface to be a typical teenager navigating the challenges of adolescence. Yet beneath this facade, she struggled with the pressures and frustrations of a young person in love. She had begun a romantic relationship with a 19-year-old man named Bruno Santos, a relationship her parents strongly disapproved of. This disapproval became a source of tension within the household, and according to investigators, it served as the primary motive for the horrific events that would unfold. In the early morning hours of September 2nd, Sarah took deliberate action. She retrieved a .264 caliber rifle from a guest house on the property, a weapon that belonged to her father. Armed and determined, she entered her parents' bedroom while her mother was asleep and her father was in the shower. In a calculated act, Sarah shot her mother in the head, ending Diane's life instantly. She then entered the bathroom and fired at her father, striking him in the chest above the heart. The meticulous execution of the attack revealed premeditation that was both disturbing and methodical. After committing the murders, Sarah fled the scene and ran to a neighbor's home, screaming that her parents had been shot. Her actions were intended to create the impression that an intruder had attacked the family. But forensic evidence quickly contradicted this claim. Investigators discovered a bathrobe and a pair of gloves discarded outside the house. Tests indicated that the gloves bore Sarah's DNA, and gunshot residue on her hands and clothing confirmed her direct involvement in the shootings. The crime scene also contained other staged elements, including knives placed at strategic locations, suggesting an attempt to mislead authorities. Sarah's arrest came weeks later, and she was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite her young age, prosecutors pursued an adult trial, citing the premeditated and calculated nature of the crime. During the trial, the prosecution emphasized that Sarah had carefully planned the murders to remove the obstacle of her parents' opposition to her romantic relationship and to gain freedom and control over her life. Evidence presented in court highlighted the deliberate nature of the killings, the manipulation of the crime scene, and the extreme lengths she went to in order to avoid detection. The defense argued that Sarah's youth and immaturity should be considered, suggesting that she lacked the full capacity to understand the consequences of her actions. They also raised questions about her mental state and whether external influences, such as peer pressure from her older boyfriend, played a role in motivating her actions. Despite these arguments, the jury was persuaded by the overwhelming forensic evidence, witness testimony, and the apparent motive rooted in her desire to continue her relationship without parental interference. In March 2005, Sarah was found guilty of both counts of first-degree murder. During sentencing, the judge highlighted the severity and premeditated nature of her actions, noting that the murders were carried out with deliberate intent rather than in a moment of emotional impulse. Sarah received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, in addition to an extra term for the use of a firearm during the crime. This sentencing reflected the court's assessment that, despite her age, Sarah posed a serious threat and had committed acts of extreme moral and legal gravity. The case had a profound impact on both the local community and national discussions about juvenile crime. Experts in psychology and criminology examined the factors contributing to her actions, including adolescent brain development, impulse control, and the influence of emotional attachment on decision-making. The notion that a teenager could plan and execute such a crime challenged conventional understanding of adolescence and raised difficult questions about the balance between accountability and the potential for rehabilitation. For the Johnson family, the tragedy was immeasurable. The loss of both parents in such a violent manner devastated extended family members and left lasting emotional scars on siblings and friends. The community, once close-knit and trusting, struggled to come to terms with the fact that the perpetrator was a member of the family itself. Sarah's trial and subsequent incarceration became a focal point for discussions about the warning signs of extreme adolescent behavior and the importance of intervention in potentially volatile family situations. From a broader perspective, the Sarah Marie Johnson case illustrates the complex dynamics of parricide, especially when committed by adolescents. While her actions were clearly premeditated and self-serving, they also shed light on how intense emotional experiences, perceived injustices, and the influence of external relationships can combine to drive a young person to commit violent acts. It serves as a cautionary tale for parents, educators, and communities to remain vigilant about the emotional and psychological well-being of teenagers, particularly when conflicts and pressures arise within the family unit. Today, Sarah Marie Johnson remains incarcerated, serving her life sentences. Her case continues to be studied in legal, psychological, and criminological contexts as an example of extreme juvenile violence and the factors that can lead a young person to commit unimaginable acts. It is remembered as a stark and sobering reminder that adolescence, while often associated with growth and innocence, can sometimes conceal dark potential, especially when combined with premeditation, obsession, and emotional turmoil. The story of Sarah Marie Johnson endures not only as a legal precedent, but as a chilling study of human behavior, morality, and the tragic consequences when adolescent impulsivity and desire collide with cold, deliberate planning. It challenges society to consider the complex intersection of youth, crime, and responsibility, and the ways in which tragic outcomes can emerge from situations that, on the surface, might appear ordinary and stable. Erica Parsons case, North Carolina, 2013. When investigators in North Carolina first began unraveling the disappearance of 13-year-old Erica Lynn Parsons, they expected to find a missing person case, painful, tragic, but straightforward. What they discovered instead was a layered and disturbing story of hidden cruelty, family dysfunction, and the involvement of an older teenage girl who participated in a home environment that authorities later described as a closed system of abuse. Erica's case would eventually expose one of the most horrifying domestic crime environments the state had ever seen. And although Erica herself was the victim, the role of her teenage sister became one of the pivotal elements of the investigation. Erica Parsons was adopted as a toddler by Sandy and Casey Parsons, a couple who already had several biological children and a chaotic household. Yet on the surface, the family appeared ordinary enough, humble, quiet, living in a modest home in Salisbury, North Carolina. But anyone looking closely soon realized that the house had two versions of reality: the crafted one shown to neighbors, teachers, and social workers, and the darker one that existed behind closed doors. Erica was often kept isolated, hidden from sight, and according to later testimony, treated not as a child, but as a servant, sometimes even as a scapegoat for the family's frustrations. Among the children living in the home was a teenage sister who played a complex, uneasy role in Erica's life. She was old enough to understand what was happening, old enough to participate in enforcing the strict household rules, and old enough to become directly involved in several incidents of mistreatment described by prosecutors. In interviews with police, the teenage daughter hesitated before speaking, as if weighing her own guilt against the overwhelming pressure of her parents' authority. Investigators concluded that, although she wasn't the architect of the abuse, she contributed to it, sometimes actively, sometimes passively, making her part of the closed circle that allowed the cruelty to continue for years. The first major break in the case came not from a family member, but from a biological son who had moved out. In 2013, he contacted authorities with a chilling revelation. He hadn't seen Erica in years. And when he asked where she was, the answers from Sandy and Casey didn't make sense. They claimed Erica was living with a mysterious relative named Nan, a grandmother from the biological side, whom the family said had taken the girl to live with her. But when investigators looked into the claim, they found that Nan didn't exist. The person supposedly caring for Erica had no record, no address, and no presence in any family documents. The story was fiction, and a poorly constructed one at that. Detectives began interviewing each family member separately. The teenage sister's testimony was unsettling. She admitted she hadn't seen Erica in years, but repeated the story about Nan, a story she had been told to believe. Under pressure, she revealed disturbing details about how Erica had been treated, the punishments, the isolation, the emotional and physical abuse that investigators later described as systematic. She admitted that she had at times participated, sometimes because she was told to, sometimes because she feared becoming a target herself. Her involvement was not the kind that made headlines on its own, but in the eyes of the court, it was enough to classify her as part of the juvenile environment that had enabled the crime. Search teams combed the property, the home, the yards, and the areas surrounding nearby counties. They found no trace of Erica, not a bone, not a piece of clothing, not even an old photograph past a certain age. It was as if Erica had simply vanished, and yet there was no sign she had ever left the home alive.
As the investigation widened, the case took on national attention. News outlets began calling it the missing child who wasn't reported missing, because Erica had been gone for 2 years before anyone outside the family realized she was missing at all. That fact alone shook the public conscience. How could a child vanish without a single report? And how could her older siblings, especially a teenage daughter, live in the home without raising the alarm? Prosecutors would later argue that the teenage sister's silence was part fear, part conditioning, part complicity. The home environment was controlled tightly by Sandy and Casey. Discipline was enforced by multiple members of the household, and even the older children were expected to participate. It created an atmosphere where obedience was absolute. Morality became blurred, and the lines between victim and participant gradually dissolved. In 2014, a major breakthrough occurred when Sandy, under mounting pressure from investigators, finally admitted that Erica had died, although he described it as an accident. His story was inconsistent, shifting, and lacking detail. He could not explain where the body was. Casey's statements contradicted his. Both parents were eventually charged with multiple counts of fraud, obstruction, and false statements because they had continued to collect adoption assistance payments long after Erica had disappeared. The teenage sister was not charged with homicide. The evidence did not show she caused Erica's death. But in the court records and the psychological evaluations presented during sentencing, her role was documented as part of the pattern of household cruelty. She had participated in punishments, assisted in isolating Erica, and helped maintain the illusion that Erica was still alive. Though she was treated as a witness rather than a defendant, the court acknowledged her behavior as one of the enabling factors that allowed the abuse to escalate. When Erica's remains were finally discovered in 2016, in a shallow grave in rural South Carolina, the truth became undeniable. The forensic report suggested long-term, repeated abuse. The nation reacted with a mixture of sorrow and outrage. And as the details spread, one of the most haunting questions remained. How many people in that house knew what was happening? And why did so few speak up? Today, Erica's story stands among the most tragic child abuse cases in North Carolina history. It is a reminder that cruelty in a family can become a system, not a single act. And although the teenage sister did not wield the final blow, her involvement, her participation in Erica's isolation, her silence, and her role in sustaining the environment that later ended in death remains a chilling example of how young people can become entangled in acts of horror they do not fully understand until it is far too late. Eliza Wozni, Illinois, 2017. In 2017, the city of Chicago and its surrounding suburbs were confronted with a crime that was both shocking and bewildering. The perpetrator was 16-year-old Eliza Wozni, a seemingly ordinary teenager whose sudden and violent actions would captivate the media and stir a nationwide debate about adolescent crime, impulsivity, and the psychology of violence. The victim was a young Uber driver, carrying passengers like any ordinary day, entirely unprepared for the brutal assault that would transform a routine ride into a headline-grabbing tragedy. Eliza Wozni's background painted a portrait of a fairly typical adolescent life. She attended high school, had a circle of friends, and was involved in extracurricular activities. Yet beneath this surface lay a disturbing pattern of impulsivity and unexplained aggression. Friends described her as moody and sometimes volatile, but no one could have anticipated the extreme nature of her actions on that fateful day. As investigators would later uncover, the attack seemed almost senseless, bereft of financial or revenge-driven motives. It was a raw, unprovoked act of violence that highlighted the unpredictable potential of teenage behavior. The incident occurred during an Uber ride in the suburban outskirts of Illinois. Eliza entered the vehicle, and almost immediately, the encounter turned violent. The attack itself was swift and brutal. According to witness statements and forensic reports, she used a weapon to assault the driver, inflicting injuries severe enough to place the victim in life-threatening condition. The crime was executed with a shocking degree of aggression, leaving law enforcement and the public questioning how someone so young could commit such a calculated, harmful act. What made the case particularly alarming was its apparent lack of motive. Unlike many violent crimes which stem from financial desperation, revenge, or familial conflict, Eliza's attack seemed almost arbitrary. Psychologists examining the case speculated on several possibilities: a sudden emotional outburst, deep-seated anger issues, or underlying mental health struggles. Her behavior became a focal point in understanding juvenile violence, highlighting how adolescent brains, still developing in regions responsible for impulse control and moral judgment, can sometimes manifest extreme actions with little explanation. The investigation into the attack was swift. Law enforcement quickly identified Eliza as the assailant, largely due to witness testimony, vehicle tracking, and her immediate presence in the vicinity of the crime. Unlike many cases where perpetrators evade capture, Eliza was apprehended almost immediately, underscoring both the efficiency of modern investigative techniques and the lack of premeditation in her escape plan. Her arrest shocked the local community. Parents, educators, and peers alike struggled to reconcile the image of a 16-year-old student with the person who had committed such a violent act. During the legal proceedings, Eliza's age became a central point of contention. On one hand, prosecutors argued that the severity and brutality of the attack warranted a long-term sentence, emphasizing public safety and accountability. On the other hand, her defense highlighted her juvenile status, psychological assessment, and the possibility of rehabilitation. Experts testified about adolescent brain development, emotional volatility, and the capacity for impulsive actions among teenagers. The courtroom debates illuminated a broader societal challenge: how to balance justice, protection of the public, and the potential for reform in cases of violent juvenile crime. The attack sparked widespread media attention. News outlets covered not only the details of the assault, but also the broader questions it raised. How could a teenager commit such violence? What societal, familial, or psychological factors contributed? And importantly, how should the justice system respond to young offenders who inflict serious harm? Public reaction was a mix of fear, outrage, and bewilderment. Social media discussions ranged from condemnation to sympathy, with some emphasizing the need for rehabilitative measures while others demanded harsher consequences. Eliza's sentencing reflected the legal system's careful navigation of these competing considerations. She was ultimately sentenced to a lengthy term in juvenile detention, one designed to extend beyond her immediate adolescence, but with provisions for evaluation, therapy, and potential reintegration into society. The sentence underscored the delicate balance that courts must maintain, acknowledging the gravity of violent acts while recognizing that a 16-year-old, unlike an adult, retains a capacity for psychological and behavioral development. The case also became a point of study for criminologists and psychologists, examining patterns of juvenile aggression. Eliza Wasney's actions were analyzed not simply as a criminal act, but as a symptom of broader issues affecting youth: emotional dysregulation, influence of peer groups, and the sometimes fragile moral compass of adolescence. Schools, parents, and law enforcement agencies used the case as an example to develop preventative strategies, from early identification of behavioral red flags to interventions aimed at guiding teenagers toward healthier coping mechanisms. Beyond the courtroom, the incident left a lasting impact on the victim, their family, and the community at large. The driver, though physically recovering, had to navigate the psychological aftermath of being attacked by a child, a scenario almost unimaginable in its terror and absurdity. Families across Illinois grappled with the reality that even seemingly ordinary teenagers could harbor unpredictable and dangerous potential. Community programs, mental health initiatives, and discussions on juvenile justice gained renewed attention as a result. Ultimately, the Eliza Wasney case serves as a disturbing yet informative chapter in the study of adolescent crime. It forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths: that youth does not guarantee innocence, that impulsivity can lead to extreme outcomes, and that societal understanding of juvenile offenders must balance accountability with the recognition of developmental vulnerability. Her story remains a cautionary tale, both about the fragility of safety in everyday life and the complex psychological landscapes of teenagers, whose actions can sometimes defy logic, expectations, and even their own moral understanding. In retrospect, Eliza Wasney's case is remembered not just for the violence she inflicted, but for the questions it raises about adolescence, responsibility, and society's role in guiding young people. It is a stark reminder that behind every shocking headline there lies a web of factors, psychological, social, and environmental, that contribute to the emergence of acts that at first glance appear senseless. Her story continues to resonate in discussions of juvenile crime, rehabilitation, and the ongoing challenge of understanding the minds of teenagers who cross the line from mischief to violence. Skylar Neese, West Virginia, 2012. In the summer of 2012, the tight-knit community of Morgantown, West Virginia was shattered by a crime that left parents, law enforcement, and the public in disbelief. The victim was 16-year-old Skylar Neese, a vibrant high school student with plans and dreams typical of her age. She had friends, a family that cared for her, and a life that seemed ordinary, until the night she disappeared under circumstances that would reveal one of the most chilling cases of teenage violence in American history. The perpetrators were not strangers, nor were they adults. They were two of Skylar's closest friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf, both 16. Their motive, when revealed, was as simple and horrifying as it was incomprehensible. We just didn't like her anymore. Skylar Neese was described by peers as outgoing, friendly, and well-liked. She had no known enemies, no overt conflicts with her friends, and no reason anyone could discern to target her. The community initially assumed that her disappearance was accidental or related to some teenage misadventure. Parents and friends combed the area, holding vigils and searching for clues, while law enforcement faced the unnerving reality that a missing child's most likely danger might come from those closest to her. The events leading up to Skylar's murder were marked by deception and betrayal. Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf, both of whom had spent countless hours with Skylar, orchestrated a plan to lure her from her home under false pretenses. According to police reports, the girls had communicated extensively beforehand, coordinating every detail to ensure that Skylar would be alone and vulnerable. The level of premeditation was staggering, particularly given the age of the perpetrators. Investigators noted that the planning displayed an alarming understanding of manipulation and control, traits rarely associated with teenagers. The murder itself was executed in a secluded location, away from the prying eyes of neighbors or passers-by. Skylar was stabbed multiple times. Her life ended in an act of brutality that seemed to contradict everything known about teenage relationships. In the aftermath, Sheila and Rachel attempted to conceal the crime, lying to family and friends while creating false narratives to deflect suspicion. Their behavior reflected a calculated effort to evade justice, further underscoring the chilling sophistication of their actions. The case gained national attention, not only because of the age of those involved, but also due to the sheer banality of the motive. During interviews with authorities, Sheila and Rachel revealed that their decision to kill Skylar was rooted in petty grievances, jealousy, and a desire to remove someone they no longer liked. This statement shocked psychologists, criminologists, and the public, who struggled to comprehend how ordinary teenage emotions could escalate to lethal violence. The case became a focal point in discussions about adolescent morality, social dynamics, and the capacity for cruelty at a young age. Investigators faced significant challenges in piecing together the truth. Sheila Eddy initially confessed in part, providing details that corroborated evidence found at the crime scene, while Rachel Schoaf remained evasive. Forensic evidence, including digital communications, cell phone records, and physical traces, played a crucial role in establishing the sequence of events and confirming premeditation. The case highlighted the intersection of traditional investigative techniques with modern technology, demonstrating how digital footprints can become critical in solving crimes that might otherwise remain hidden. The trial of Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf was closely watched by the nation. Both girls were 16, legally minors, which complicated sentencing. Prosecutors emphasized the brutal nature of the crime, the premeditation, and the cold-blooded motive, arguing for sentences that would reflect the severity of their actions and protect the community. Defense attorneys focused on the girls' age, psychological development, and potential for rehabilitation, arguing that adolescence brings with it a capacity for impulsive, poorly considered actions. The courtroom became a microcosm of the broader debate over juvenile justice, accountability versus the recognition that young minds are still developing. Ultimately, both Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, ranging from 30 years to life, reflecting the gravity of their crime while acknowledging their age. The sentences sparked discussions about the adequacy of juvenile sentencing, the role of rehabilitation in cases of extreme violence, and how society should respond when children commit crimes typically associated with adults. Psychologists emphasized that the case was not only an anomaly, but also a valuable lens through which to examine the potential for manipulation, moral disengagement, and the emergence of psychopathic traits in adolescence. Beyond the legal ramifications, the murder of Skylar Neese left a profound impact on the community. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the tragedy with the apparent normalcy of the girls involved. Vigils and memorials honored Skylar's life, while local schools and youth organizations began implementing programs aimed at identifying early warning signs of aggression and teaching conflict resolution skills. The story became a cautionary tale, illustrating that violent impulses can exist even among those closest to us, and that vigilance, education, and community support are essential in preventing similar tragedies. The Skylar Neese case remains one of the most discussed and studied instances of teenage violence in the United States.
It challenges assumptions about friendship, loyalty, and adolescent morality, demonstrating that extreme acts of cruelty are not solely the domain of adults. For criminologists, it provides insight into the dynamics of peer influence, premeditation, and moral disengagement. For the public, it serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly ordinary relationships can turn deadly when jealousy, resentment, and unchecked impulses converge. In reflecting on Skylar's life and the crime that ended it, one is confronted with a stark juxtaposition: the vibrancy of youth against the capacity for darkness, the ordinariness of teenage social life against the extremity of premeditated murder. Skylar Neese's story endures as a tragic testament to the unpredictability of human behavior, the fragility of trust, and the urgent need for understanding, intervention, and awareness in addressing juvenile crime. It forces society to confront uncomfortable questions about how adolescents develop moral reasoning, the influence of peers, and the societal structures necessary to prevent similar acts of violence in the future.
Tia Skinner, Michigan, 2010. In 2010, the quiet suburbs of Michigan were rocked by a crime that forced communities and law enforcement alike to confront a chilling reality. The capacity for lethal violence can emerge even among the very young, and sometimes the danger comes from within the family itself. The perpetrator was 17-year-old Tia Skinner, a teenager whose life until that point had seemed largely ordinary, yet whose actions would leave an indelible mark on the local consciousness. The victims were her own parents, a stark reminder that domestic violence is not always external. It can be initiated from within and at times in the most incomprehensible ways. Tia Skinner grew up in a household that by most accounts appeared stable. Friends and acquaintances described her as intelligent and socially active, though somewhat moody and prone to conflict with authority figures. Adolescence often brings challenges, but in Tia's case, underlying behavioral issues and simmering resentment toward her parents became central to the tragic events that would unfold. By 2010, she had already exhibited signs of manipulation and a willingness to assert control over those around her. traits that would later manifest in a horrifying crime. The attack was not impulsive. Court records and investigative reports indicate that Tia orchestrated the assault carefully, recruiting 2 acquaintances to assist her in the plan. This premeditation added a layer of complexity to the case, demonstrating that her actions were calculated rather than merely the product of teenage impulsivity. The chosen accomplices, who were aware of the plan but not entirely in control of the circumstances, played a role in executing the attack. Yet responsibility ultimately rested with Tia, who had initiated and directed the events. On the day of the crime, Tia's father was killed during the attack, while her mother survived, though she sustained severe injuries.
Law enforcement described the scene as chaotic and brutal, reflecting both the violence of the assault and the strategic planning behind it. Investigators noted that Tia's involvement went beyond mere participation. She had coordinated the timing, the method, and the actions of her accomplices, ensuring that her plan would be carried out as intended. This level of control in a teenager raised significant questions about adolescent psychology, morality, and the development of violent tendencies. The investigation into the crime revealed not only the premeditation, but also the underlying motives. According to court documents, Tia harbored long-standing resentment toward her father, which escalated into anger and ultimately homicidal intent. Psychological evaluations conducted during the trial highlighted her manipulative tendencies, her lack of empathy, and her capacity for strategic thinking, traits often associated with adult criminal behavior rather than teenage impulsivity. Experts emphasized that while Tia's age could have suggested immaturity, her actions reflected a level of planning and psychological awareness that defied typical developmental expectations. Media coverage of the case amplified public fascination and horror. Newspapers and television outlets described Tia as a teen mastermind, focusing on the audacity of the crime and her age. The narrative often highlighted the paradox of adolescence, a stage of life associated with vulnerability and dependency, yet capable, in rare cases, of calculated and lethal behavior. Public reaction ranged from disbelief to fear, as parents and community members grappled with the unsettling reality that a teenager could orchestrate the murder of her own father and severely injure her mother. During the trial, the legal system had to navigate the complexities inherent in prosecuting a juvenile for a crime typically associated with adults. Tia's defense argued that her age, psychological state, and potential for rehabilitation should be considered in sentencing. The prosecution countered with the gravity of the crime, the deliberate nature of the attack, and the need to protect society from a highly dangerous individual. Courtroom testimony from forensic psychologists painted a vivid picture of Tia's behavioral profile, emphasizing her capacity for planning, her emotional detachment during the crime, and her strategic manipulation of peers. Ultimately, Tia Skinner was sentenced to life in prison, a verdict reflecting both the severity of her crime and the legal acknowledgement of her central role as the instigator. The sentence highlighted the judiciary's challenge in balancing accountability with the recognition of her youth, a task made more complex by the fact that, despite her age, her actions demonstrated calculated intent and strategic execution. This case became a reference point in discussions of juvenile homicide, family violence,
and the limits of rehabilitation for young offenders who commit extreme acts. The broader societal impact of the Tia Skinner case extended beyond the courtroom. It sparked conversations about warning signs of violent behavior among adolescents, the influence of peer dynamics in criminal activity, and the role of family relationships in shaping youth behavior. Schools, social workers, and community programs used the case as a cautionary example, emphasizing the importance of early intervention, conflict resolution, and monitoring behavioral red flags in teenagers. Psychologists studying the case stressed that while extreme cases like Tia's are rare, they provide critical insights into the intersection of adolescent development, family dynamics, and violent behavior. For the surviving mother, the aftermath was both physical and emotional. Recovery involved not only healing from injuries, but also navigating the psychological trauma of being attacked by her own daughter.
The community, meanwhile, was forced to reckon with the unsettling truth that violence can emerge from the most unexpected sources, and that adolescence, though often a time of growth and learning, can in exceptional cases produce behaviors that defy understanding. In retrospect, the Tia Skinner case remains a haunting illustration of how familial resentment, adolescent psychology, and the capacity for manipulation can converge to create tragedy. It challenges assumptions about youth, morality, and criminal responsibility, forcing society to confront uncomfortable questions about when a child's actions warrant adult-level consequences. Her story continues to resonate in discussions of juvenile crime, family violence, and the psychological underpinnings of premeditated murder among teenagers. It serves as a sobering reminder of the fragile line between ordinary adolescence and acts of extraordinary violence, and the critical importance of vigilance, intervention, and understanding in preventing such tragedies from occurring. Anna Kriegel, Ireland, 2018. In 2018, the quiet suburb of Lucan, near Dublin, Ireland, was shaken by a crime that would dominate national headlines and spark widespread debate about juvenile violence, peer pressure, and the dark potential that can lurk in adolescence. The victim was 14-year-old Anna Kriegel, a bright and lively girl described by friends and family as cheerful, outgoing, and full of promise. Her life was tragically cut short in a case that involved both boys and the subtle yet significant influence of a teenage girl, a reminder that even indirect participation can play a critical role in the unfolding of violent acts. Anna Kriegel's upbringing was characterized by warmth and care. She was enrolled in school, active in extracurricular activities, and surrounded by friends. Yet, beneath the surface, she struggled with the typical challenges of early adolescence, navigating friendships, peer dynamics, and the pressures of teenage life. None of these factors, however, could have foreshadowed the extreme violence that would claim her life. The crime was not only shocking in its brutality, but also in the disturbing involvement of young perpetrators who, like Anna, were still navigating the complexities of adolescence. The murder was carried out by two teenage boys, both older than Anna, who lured her to a secluded location under the pretense of friendship. The circumstances of the crime revealed a disturbing blend of planning and impulsivity. According to court reports, the boys had long-standing tensions with Anna, and their decision to attack her was influenced by a combination of peer dynamics, personal grievances, and a desire to assert power. While the boys executed the act, a teenage girl in their social circle played a role in pressuring and influencing them, demonstrating how indirect participation, through coercion, encouragement, or facilitation,
can contribute to tragedy even if the individual does not physically carry out the violence. The attack itself was brutal. Anna was physically overpowered and suffered fatal injuries. Her body was discovered in an abandoned house, prompting an intense investigation that mobilized local law enforcement and the wider community. Investigators noted that the crime exhibited both impulsive elements and premeditated planning, highlighting the complex psychological and social factors that can drive juveniles to extreme acts. The involvement of multiple adolescents in orchestrating and influencing the event added layers of complexity to the case, challenging investigators to untangle responsibility, motive, and influence. Public reaction to Anna Kriegel's murder was intense and emotional. Ireland, like many countries, was unprepared for the notion that teenagers could commit such a heinous act, and the story dominated media coverage for months. Psychologists, criminologists, and social commentators analyzed the case, emphasizing the role of peer influence, family dynamics, and adolescent development in understanding juvenile crime. The case became a lens through which Irish society examined the responsibilities of young people to one another, and the ways in which coercion and pressure can escalate into lethal violence. During the trial, the role of the teenage girl, though indirect, was scrutinized extensively. Evidence showed that she had applied pressure on the boys, participated in discussions leading up to the crime, and helped facilitate the circumstances that allowed the attack to occur. While she did not physically commit the murder, the court recognized her influence as a contributing factor, illustrating a critical aspect of juvenile justice, the recognition that social dynamics and manipulation can make individuals complicit in serious crimes, even without direct physical involvement. This aspect of the case drew significant attention from legal experts, highlighting the challenges of assigning responsibility in crimes involving multiple young actors.
The two boys who carried out the murder were sentenced in accordance with Ireland's laws regarding juvenile offenders, receiving long-term detention orders that reflected the severity of their actions while accounting for their age. The teenage girl involved was similarly dealt with under juvenile justice provisions, with sentences focused on rehabilitation, oversight, and societal protection. These rulings sparked discussions about the balance between accountability and the potential for reform, emphasizing the need for careful consideration when dealing with violent acts committed by adolescents. Psychologists studying the case emphasized several key factors that contributed to the tragedy. Peer pressure, the desire for social dominance, and immature moral reasoning were all cited as contributing elements. The case also highlighted the importance of early intervention, social support networks, and education aimed at helping teenagers navigate conflicts and resist coercive influences. In this context, Anna Kriegel's murder served as a tragic example of what can happen when these safeguards fail and when adolescents wield influence in destructive ways. The aftermath of the crime left deep scars on the community. Anna's family, friends, and neighbors were forced to confront a reality few could imagine: that the people responsible for her death were not strangers, but peers, influenced by one another and operating within a web of social pressures that made violence possible. Vigils and memorials were held, emphasizing Anna's life and potential rather than the brutality of her death. The community, meanwhile, engaged in reflection and reform, focusing on the role of schools, social services, and peer support in preventing similar tragedies. Anna Kriegel's case remains a pivotal moment in Irish legal and social history. It is cited in studies of juvenile crime, peer influence, and adolescent psychology. It serves as a somber reminder that adolescence, while often a time of growth and exploration, can also be a period of vulnerability, both to coercion and to the emergence of violent behavior. The involvement of multiple young individuals, each contributing in different ways, underscores the complex dynamics of juvenile crime and the necessity for careful attention to social influence, moral development, and early intervention. Ultimately, the Anna Kriegel case challenges society to confront difficult questions about adolescence, morality, and responsibility. It forces reflection on how young people navigate social pressures, how influence can become coercion, and how tragic outcomes can arise when empathy, guidance, and moral judgment fail to develop fully. Anna's life, cut short in a moment of unimaginable violence, continues to resonate as a call for vigilance, understanding, and proactive engagement with the challenges and risks inherent in teenage development. Karla Homolka, Quebec, Canada, 1990s. Karla Homolka's name has become synonymous with one of Canada's most chilling crime sprees of the 1990s, a story that intertwines manipulation, deceit, and the dark complexity of human psychology. Born in 1970 in Port Credit, Ontario, Homolka appeared at first glance to be an ordinary young woman. She was charismatic, attractive, and socially adept, traits that would later play a significant role in her criminal activities. Yet behind this facade lurked a disturbing complicity in crimes that would horrify a nation. In the early 1990s, Karla Homolka entered into a relationship with Paul Bernardo, a man who would later be known as the Scarborough Rapist. Bernardo was violent, sadistic, and manipulative, and together they formed a terrifying partnership. While Bernardo had a history of sexual assaults on women in the Toronto area, it was the collaboration with Homolka that escalated the violence to murder. The couple's actions would culminate in the deaths of at least 3 young women, including Homolka's own sister-in-law, Tammy Homolka, and 2 teenagers, Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. The first known victim was Tammy Homolka, Karla's sister-in-law, who in 1990 was drugged during a party and sexually assaulted by both Karla and Paul. The assault ended tragically when Tammy died from choking after being incapacitated by a powerful sedative. This act, horrifying in itself, marked the beginning of a pattern. Karla was not a passive bystander but an active participant, assisting in luring and drugging the victim. This complicity would later become a central point of controversy during legal proceedings, as some debated the extent of her voluntariness and the influence Bernardo held over her. In 1991 and 1992, the couple targeted Leslie Mahaffey, a 15-year-old girl, and Kristen French, a 14-year-old, abducting them from their homes in the Ontario area. Both girls were held captive, subjected to prolonged sexual assault, and ultimately murdered. Homolka's role in these crimes included aiding in the abductions, participating in the assaults, and helping to dispose of evidence. The meticulous nature of their acts revealed a calculated and methodical approach. The victims were carefully monitored, confined, and eventually killed to prevent discovery. The crimes were gruesome and premeditated, reflecting both the depravity of Bernardo and the complicity of Homolka, whose involvement challenged traditional notions of female criminality. Homolka's demeanor following the crimes was notable. She maintained a public image as a devoted girlfriend and family-oriented woman, participating in social events and even attending school functions, while the investigations loomed. Investigators later noted that she provided crucial access to Bernardo's activities, but at the time, authorities did not immediately suspect her of active participation. Her ability to mask involvement illustrates a chilling duality. The public persona of innocence, juxtaposed with active engagement in unspeakable acts behind closed doors. The case took a dramatic turn when Homolka entered into a plea deal with prosecutors in 1993, often referred to as the deal with the devil in Canadian media. In exchange for her full testimony against Bernardo, she received a reduced sentence of 12 years in prison, a deal that sparked outrage. Many viewed the agreement as a miscarriage of justice, given the severity of her participation. Her plea was based on claims of duress and manipulation, suggesting she had acted under Bernardo's coercive influence. While her testimony was instrumental in securing Bernardo's conviction, public perception was deeply divided. Some argued she was a victim of Bernardo's domination, while others insisted she was an equally culpable partner in the murders.
During the trial, evidence included video recordings made by the couple, which horrifyingly captured the assaults and murders of Mahaffey and French. These recordings confirmed Homolka's active participation and countered her portrayal as merely coerced. Psychologists and legal experts debated the extent to which Homolka's behavior was influenced by fear, manipulation, and a desire for acceptance versus a calculated willingness to participate. The videos, combined with forensic evidence and witness testimony, created a compelling narrative of complicity. Bernardo was convicted of multiple charges, including first-degree murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping, receiving life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Homolka served her 12-year sentence and was released in 2005. Her release sparked renewed public debate and media scrutiny. Some Canadians feared the potential for recidivism, while others argued that she had served the legal term determined by the plea agreement. Her post-release life remained largely private, though she faced continued public attention, illustrating the lasting impact of her crimes on the national consciousness. The Karla Homolka case remains a stark study in the psychology of criminal partnerships and female complicity in violent crime. Her actions demonstrate that manipulation, charisma, and interpersonal influence can intersect with extreme criminal behavior, challenging assumptions about gender, morality, and culpability. Legal scholars continue to debate the ethical implications of her plea deal, the influence of coercion, and the extent of her moral responsibility. Ultimately, the Homolka case is remembered not only for its horror, but also for the profound questions it raises about human behavior, justice, and societal response to juvenile and young adult crime. It illustrates that female perpetrators, often underestimated in violent crime, can be active, calculating, and complicit participants in acts of extreme violence. The story serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of manipulation, the dangers of coercive relationships, and the enduring consequences of decisions made in adolescence and early adulthood. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, Wisconsin, 2014. In 2014, the suburban town of Waukesha, Wisconsin became the center of a chilling story that blurred the lines between reality and fantasy, adolescence and horror. The perpetrators were not hardened criminals or adults, but two 12-year-old girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, who attempted to murder their classmate in an act they claimed was commanded by a fictional character known as Slender Man. The victim,
a friend and peer, was stabbed 19 times in a wooded area, narrowly surviving the attack. The case stunned the nation and became a grim example of the dangerous intersection of imagination, online culture, and adolescent vulnerability. Morgan and Anissa were both typical middle school students in many ways. They attended school, had friends, and were immersed in the digital culture common to preteens. However, both exhibited signs of social anxiety and difficulty distinguishing fantasy from reality. Morgan, in particular, had been deeply influenced by the Slender Man mythos, a fictional character originating from internet forums and creepypasta stories. She believed, or at least expressed belief, that she and Anissa needed to commit murder to prove their loyalty to this fictional entity and to prevent harm to their families. Anissa, slightly more hesitant, nonetheless participated under Morgan's influence, demonstrating how peer dynamics and perceived authority can escalate into real-world violence even among children. The attack was meticulously planned, reflecting a disturbing blend of premeditation and delusional thinking. Morgan and Anissa lured their friend into the woods under the guise of spending time together, then ambushed her with knives. The brutality of the assault, 19 stab wounds inflicted on a child barely older than themselves, shocked investigators and the public alike. Despite the severity of her injuries, the victim survived, a testament to both her resilience and the timely intervention that followed. The event immediately triggered a complex investigation, blending forensic science with psychological assessment, to understand how two preteens could commit such a violent act. Law enforcement quickly determined that the girls were influenced by the Slender Man mythology, which had become a pervasive part of their online environment. Forums, videos, and fan content had blurred the line between reality and fiction, fostering a belief in the character's existence and the necessity of violent action to appease him. Experts later noted that this case highlighted a unique aspect of modern juvenile crime: the capacity for immersive online narratives to distort a young person's perception of reality and morality. In essence, the girl's belief in Slender Man transformed a fictional story into a tangible, motivating force for extreme violence. During the investigation, it became clear that Morgan was the more dominant personality, articulating the need for the attack and influencing Anissa's actions. Anissa, while complicit, exhibited signs of hesitation and internal conflict, underscoring the role of peer influence and psychological manipulation in juvenile crime. Both girls were taken into custody and subjected to extensive psychiatric evaluation, as authorities sought to assess their mental state, capacity for criminal intent, and risk to society. The case quickly became a focal point in discussions about adolescent mental health, online safety, and the responsibility of society to monitor and intervene when young people show signs of delusional thinking or violent intent. The trial was highly publicized, drawing attention from media outlets worldwide. Morgan and Anissa were tried as juveniles, given their age and psychological evaluations. Both were found to be suffering from significant mental health issues. Morgan, diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia, was determined to have acted under delusional beliefs, while Anissa's involvement was influenced by her susceptibility to peer pressure and fear of Morgan's authority. Consequently, the court ruled that neither girl was criminally responsible in the conventional sense, and both were committed to psychiatric institutions for treatment, rather than traditional prison sentences. Public reaction was a mixture of horror, confusion, and reflection. Many struggled to comprehend how two 12-year-old girls could nearly murder a friend, while others examined the societal factors that contributed to the incident. Online culture, social isolation, and insufficient understanding of adolescent mental health. Educators, psychologists, and parents began emphasizing the importance of monitoring children's online activity, recognizing early warning signs of detachment from reality, and providing mental health support for young people exhibiting unusual behavior. The case served as a wake-up call that childhood does not automatically shield against exposure to dangerous ideas or influence. The Slender Man case also sparked a broader discussion about the intersection of fantasy and real-world consequences. Psychologists pointed out that preteens possess an imaginative capacity that can sometimes conflate fiction with reality, especially when combined with social isolation or susceptibility to peer pressure. In Morgan and Anissa's case, this conflation turned imagination into a near-fatal reality, demonstrating that juvenile crime can emerge not only from anger, revenge, or impulse, but also from distorted perceptions and delusional beliefs. For the surviving victim, recovery was both physical and emotional. Despite 19 stab wounds, she survived, a testament to timely medical intervention. But the psychological trauma of being attacked by peers remains profound.
Her experience, coupled with the girl's mental health evaluations, underscored the complexity of juvenile crime, where delusion, influence, and immaturity converge. The case continues to be studied in schools, legal circles, and psychiatric contexts as an example of extreme adolescent behavior catalyzed by online mythology and peer dynamics. Ultimately, the Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir case is remembered not merely for the act of violence, but for what it reveals about the vulnerabilities of youth in the digital age. It highlights the importance of early mental health intervention, parental oversight, and societal awareness of the powerful influence of online narratives. The case demonstrates that even seemingly harmless stories can become dangerous under the right psychological conditions, and that adolescence, while typically a period of growth and exploration, can also be a time of extreme susceptibility to influence, delusion, and moral misjudgment. The Slender Man attack remains a sobering lesson in juvenile psychology, digital responsibility, and the complexities of adolescent crime. It forces communities to examine the ways children internalize and act upon fantastical concepts, the role of peer influence in shaping behavior, and the importance of understanding, intervention, and support to prevent tragedies from emerging from the intersection of imagination and real-world action.